Today is June the 15th. Where do we find hospitality in the Old Testament? Let's find out together as we look at 5 different examples of hospitality in the Old Testament. As we open the pages of the Old Testament, the very first example of hospitality that we're introduced to occurs in Genesis chapter 1. God created a garden. That's explained in much more detail in Genesis chapter 2, but he invites Adam and Eve into his own garden. He invites them there where they find shelter and they find food. It would be easy to overlook, but we should not overlook the fact that hospitality begins with God. We practice hospitality because he practiced it first with us. Second time that we see hospitality, we come to Genesis chapter 18. Abraham is sitting under an oak tree in Mamre. And while he is there, he sees 3 strangers come, and they're identified as men who come, but they're strangers. He doesn't know them. Abraham runs to them, he bows low. Verse 3, "My Lord," he said, "if it pleases you, stop here for a while. Rest in the shade of this tree while water is brought to wash your feet. Since you've honored your servant with this visit, let me prepare some food to refresh you before you continue on your journey." In the paragraph, the chapter that follows, this initial offer of a little water and a piece of bread becomes a full meal. He sends Sarah to bake more bread. He sends servants to kill a calf and butcher the calf and cook the calf. He treats these men royally. He finds out that it is actually God who is visiting him. In chapter 19, the 3 go on to Sodom and Gomorrah. When they get to Sodom, where Lot lives, Lot invites them into his home to receive his hospitality. Now, if you know the story, you know that the men of Lot pounded on the door and asked for the 3 strangers so that they could sexually abuse them, and Lot refused. When the men became violent, the angels struck them with blindness. But the point is the example of hospitality that we have here. What Abraham did to the north in the oak grove at Mamre, Lot also did in the city of Sodom when these 3 men showed up at the city plaza, the center of town. Joshua chapter 2 is another example of hospitality. Again, it would be easy to overlook it because of what takes place there. Joshua looking to spy out the city of Jericho sent 2 spies. Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them, scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, and especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. It'd be easy to overlook that because it looks like these 2 men are just spending the night with a prostitute. But the words used here are that Rahab showed them hospitality. the impression that we get, she did not offer them what she would offer the men of Jericho. She offered them protection. She offered them a place to stay and a meal to eat. She offered them hospitality. Another example of hospitality takes place in 2 Kings chapter 4, where a woman who had observed Elisha's ministry prior to that in chapter 4, he had helped a widow. News of that apparently spread. And in verse 8, one day Elisha went to the town of Shunem. A wealthy widow, a wealthy woman lived there. She urged him to come to her home for a meal, and after that, whenever he passed that way, he'd stop there for something to eat. The woman said to her husband, "I'm sure this man who stops in from time to time is a holy man of God. Let's build a small room for him under the roof. Furnish it with a bed, a table, a lamp, and a chair. He'll have a place to stay when he comes by." And lo and behold, that's exactly what he did. That comes to be known as the prophet's chamber. Many people since that time have prophet's chambers for traveling evangelists. That it's part of their home or part of what their church has. The point is, hospitality was offered. It is interesting here that the woman wasn't even too sure who Elisha was. She said he must be a holy man. So while she had heard of some of the things that he had done, she really didn't know that much about him. She was offering kindness to a stranger. Then finally, in Isaiah chapter 58, the prophet in verse 7 says, "Share your food with the hungry, give shelter to the homeless, give clothes to those who need them, and don't hide from relatives who need your help." Show kindness to the vulnerable among you. Now, we learn several things through these different illustrations of hospitality in the Old Testament. One of the first things that we learn is, and this perhaps goes back to the fact that Israel was largely nomadic at the time that these things were taking place. People would travel through and you didn't know if they were a threat or not. Receiving a stranger alleviates the threat. For us today, having a neighbor that we don't know much about, there's two ways to respond. We can keep them at arm's distance, or we can show them hospitality. We can learn about them. It alleviates the threat that there might be. Secondly, receiving a stranger shows solidarity with the stranger. Now that's what happened in Rahab's case. The spies came into Jericho. She received them into her house. She actually hid them from city officials who were looking for them, and then said to them before they left, "I know God is going to give you this city. Protect me and my family." And they said, "If you hang this red cord in your window, you'll be protected." She did. She was. And she ends up in the genealogy of Jesus in the New Testament. Thirdly, we show hospitality because God first showed us hospitality. We learned that in the Garden of Eden, but it's true throughout our life as well. So today, as we wrap up, I'd just like you to think about the different ways that God has shown you hospitality. What are some of those ways? Thank Him for that today. Please like, follow, and subscribe to this devotional. Send your questions to us at questions@becomehope.com. Tomorrow, we'll look at examples of hospitality in the New Testament.